Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 125BV blower vac. Customer complaint is that it wasn't running right and now it won't restart. He said when it wasn't running right, it was low on power, and after he shut it off, try to get going again, nothing. So we're taking a look in the fuel tank first. The fuel itself looks pretty good. When you hear that little clunk when you're dumping the fuel out, that's usually the fuel filter coming out. And in this case, the fuel line is rotten and the filter fell off. So if the fuel line is bouncing around inside the tank, it might not be weighted down to the bottom and you might not be drawing fuel, could be sucking air. Certainly can explain all of his complaints. This dirty air filter isn't helping the situation at all. So we know that we're going to replace the fuel line. Oh boy, look at all that schmutz. That's not good. It sucked in a lot of dirt. Right now, I can look into the discharge hole of this thing, and I see a little clue in there, and I'm going to show it to you. First of all, I want to show you that this tube has got a lock and unlock position. We switch it to unlock and then twist the tube off, and we have a little surprise in here. It's a glove. So do you think that could be his low on power complaint? Is that the thing was trying to fight a glove? Could it be the reason why it wouldn't start is because he couldn't pull it over fast enough because there's all that restriction? And the bigger question is, does he wear the glove? I've seen this before, and it was actually gloves. And when I told the customer what had happened, he did mention that he lost his gloves, and I had both of them in the tube there. So it happens. I think they just fall out of your pocket and you don't notice, and they get sucked up with the leaves. Here's our spark plug. It is what it is, right? All right, we're gonna look in the cylinder with this Teslong, I believe is the name. Now, if you follow this channel, you know that I don't promote items for manufacturers. I don't accept items and get paid for doing any kind of reviews. At least I haven't yet. If I promote anything, it's my eBay store or things I make and sell. But this company here, I bought this camera. I paid like $300 for it. And there's something floating around in the lens, and it will land in front of the viewer, and when you're trying to look into the screen, all you see is that piece floating around in there. And it occurred to me that the thing might still be under warranty. Looks like we got good spark here. So I went on their website and I saw that when they do warranty claims, they'd want a proof of purchase, and they'd want some kind of pictures explaining what the claim might be. So I just took a picture, took a screenshot of my receipt, and emailed them and asked them to consider it for warranty. And their reply back to me was a tracking number for a new unit. That's very good customer service. And I would recommend, if you're looking for a camera, that you consider purchasing from this company, Teslong, because they did me quite well. So there's my little spiel on that. I'm not getting paid to say that. They voluntarily did the right thing, and I'm just telling you about it. All right, so while I was babbling there, we looked in the cylinder, and it wasn't perfect, but we're gonna, there's still some life left in this machine. We're gonna get this going.
Of course, good.
And in order to get it going, we're gonna put new fuel lines in it. You'll notice these 3 screws on the top of the handle are coarse thread, and the 4 that I took out of the starter are fine thread, so pay attention to that. There's a lot of dust and dirt underneath here, but I don't see anything wrong. Here's our trigger lever and throttle rod. Yeah, everything looks pretty good right now. So what I need to do is pull the carburetor off of here so that I can access the fuel lines. And you saw me just wiggling the air filter box. That was to check the tightness of the intake manifold screws. When they get loose, the unit has to be stripped down a little farther than this yet. And those screws need to be tightened up. Otherwise, it's an air leak. You're going to end up with problems. So we pulled the 2 nuts off the air box. Now we can get this out of the way. We got our carburetor and a bunch of rotten fuel lines. I'm going to pop this line off of here. There we go. And we'll pop out our primer bulb. Now the kit we're going to use is going to come with a new primer bulb. More schmutz. Alright, here's our fuel line kit. There's your part number. You see that we have the primer, the fuel lines, the filter, and the tank grommet. I'm using this radiator hose pick to pull the old grommet out of the tank. And we're fishing some old fuel line out of the tank. Yeah, that line is pretty rotten. I think that razor blade's a little dull. That tool gets used a lot. Alright, I had a viewer send me some rubber lubricant I want to try, but I keep forgetting to bring it to the shop. So we're just going to use some alcohol here as a lubricant to put this grommet in. One of these videos I'll give that stuff a try. I think it's called P.80. And it's a rubber assembly lubricant. It's supposed to work pretty good, but I don't know that yet because I haven't tried it. Alright, you see I kind of sped through that video because that grommet was extra tight in there. And I struggled with it a little bit. When you're putting that in there, there's actually instructions that tell you to put it in the tank a certain way. That's to get the filter to lay the right way down in the tank. I always put the short hose that's sticking up off to the right towards the fan housing because that's where the fitting is on the carburetor. Man, them lines just don't want to give it up. Now, the thing was running okay before he sucked up the glove. He did say, what am I want to say here? Should I open up the carburetor or not and take a look? And I probably could have or should have, but you know, he was out using the machine and then he all of a sudden kind of had a problem. So I don't know if it actually sucked any dirt and the microscreen is dirty, or if he just sucked up the glove and then that I stumbled upon the broken hose. Maybe it would have ran that way longer. I don't know. He was kind of on the fence about spending money on this repair or replacing the unit. And I don't know if he needs to replace the unit. We're going to try this without going into the carb, save some labor. And if it runs decent, you know, good enough. If it doesn't run decent and it needs more work, we can address it then. And if he bought a new unit from us, you know, I would just take that into consideration, whether or not we even charged him for what we're doing here. So we have our fuel lines back on, and it was pretty easy to know which line went where because the short line went down on the bottom of the carburetor and the long line from the purge bulb snuck around the back side of the carb and went up on top and went on the only other fitting. All right, we got our 2 nuts, 8mm driver. We'll crank these down. And put our new air filter on here. More dirt. All right, choke lever seems to work right. Here's our throttle rod and trigger. The rod just hooks into the trigger and then slips into the linkage on the carburetor. Pretty simple. All right, I want to put the cover on now. There's a muffler shield that has to be installed right here. And the only thing with the muffler shield is that right there's a grommet that the kill switch wire passes through. You want to make sure that's in place. And then the kill switch itself, when you put this cover on, you got to make sure that it's you know, above the groove there on the cover, like that. And you should never have to force this on there. It should drop into place. So if you're fighting it, pull the cover back off and take a look at it and see what's holding you up. Now these 2 screws here are the coarse ones going into plastic. This screw is coarse as well. And then we have our starter, and that's going to have the 4 fine thread screws. Look at him go. All right, let's get this tube back on here. Now this gate, it's kind of a pain in the butt. I find that prying it while pushing on the latch seems to be the best way to do it. And I don't see, yeah, we got to put the glove back where we found it, right? I don't see any broken fins or any damage that way. That glove couldn't have been running around in there that long. And there's symbols here for the lock and unlock positions. It's pretty hard to mess this up. It'll only go one way, but if you line everything up, it just pops together. Here we go. Well, let's get some fuel in here and see if it'll start and run. And if it does, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 125BV blower vac. It wasn't running right because it had rotten fuel lines and it sucked up a glove. Thanks for watching. Later. It's priming decent, so that micro screen's probably not plugged.